2024, the Nigerian Labour Congress and Trade Union Congress, along with their affiliates, embark on an indefinite strike to demand for increase in the minimum wage of workers as a direct response to cushion the effect of fuel subsidy removal, amongst other economic measures adopted by the current administration. Aware also that the federal government, being mindful of the harsh economic realities and the need to ensure smooth economic transition to alleviate the burdens on citizens, put some measures in place, which include, but not limited to, the wage award of 35,000 naira per month across the board, financial assistance through direct transfers, public transport regulation mechanism, and so on. Senate recalls that the federal government on the 2nd April 2024 set up a 37-man tripartite committee with its membership drawn from the federal, state governments, organized labor, and the private sector. The terms of reference of the committee, among other things, is to recommend a new national minimum wage for the country. Also recall that the wage award, which was introduced by the federal government in September 2023, was expected to last for a period of 6 months, within which all the negotiations and deliberations on the new minimum wage must have been concluded. However, the assignment is still going on due largely to due to conditions on the part of the organized labor and the federal government to reach an agreement and have a common ground on the matter. In spite of this development, the federal government, not being oblivious of the hardships of Nigerians are passing through, extended indefinitely the payment of the wage award pending the final determination of the national minimum wage, as discussions are further and further negotiations are still on. Senate notes that in spite of the efforts demonstrated by the federal government, the organized labor embarked on another indefinite strike, which has shut down all socio-economic activities in the country, particularly in the areas of health, national grid, the ongoing WAEC examination, and air travels, amongst others. This, without doubt, has dire and debilitating effects on our well-being and economies and the country's economy. Senate also notes that globally there is dwindling economic downturn, and Nigeria is not an exception. As such, all hands must be on deck to ensure that collectively we can overcome these challenges we are confronted with as a nation. Senate further notes that consequent upon the meeting held between organized labor and the federal government on Monday, 3rd June 2024, and the resolution reached therein, it is imperative that the organized labor suspends the ongoing indefinite strike to pave way for further negotiations, which are already yielding positive results. Accordingly, Senate resolves to urge the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress and all other affiliates to, as a matter of urgency and patriotism, call off the indefinite strike action embarked upon by them and return to negotiation table, which is still ongoing. 2, Senate urged the federal government to put measures and modalities in place with a view to nipping in the bud the ugly situation and finally lay to rest the controversy surrounding the national minimum wage matter, as Nigeria cannot afford the huge economic losses occasioned by the industrial action, which has so far-reaching effect on the economy. And Senate urged both parties to adopt diplomacy and devise a means of arriving at the comprehensive policy that would be beneficial to both the private and public sectors in a way that will not drive the economy to an unprecedented downturn that would lead to a mass laying off of workers in the private sector and leading to retention by government workers. This is my motion for debate. Thank you for the opportunity.
I second this motion because of its attainment. But I will quick to add that the news has just come to me and some other senators here that the organized labor comprising of the NLC and TUC has suspended strike for 1 week. So whether the motion is good, but it has been overtaken by the suspension of the strike. So the Senate or the President will guide the Senate on what to do further. Because obviously, this motion, as good as it is, it has been overtaken by the suspension of the strike. And I feel there's no need to discuss the suspension of the strike having been suspended by the NLC and TUC. I so submit, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mohammed Ali Ndume, representing Borno South. Mr. President, the Deputy Senate President has spoken, but I want to bring to the attention of our colleagues that in 2019, in 2019, clerk, you're laughing at me. So even the clerk is trying to laugh.
The clerk is wondering where you were in 1929.
When labor is on strike, you see, it can get confused. But having said that, Mr. President, on a serious note, in 2019, this National Assembly passed a bill in which the minimum wage was pegged at 30,000 per month. And Section 3 of that act, which I have here, and I want to read. Every employer shall pay a minimum wage of not less than 30,000 per month to every worker under his establishment, except otherwise provided under this act. And Section 4 says, the national minimum wage expires after 5 years, and it shall be reviewed in line with the provision of this act. The law is there. So I'm suggesting, as much as negotiation is going on this fact, the national minimum wage is guided by law, an act of National Assembly. And if upward review or otherwise should be the responsibility of the National Assembly. And therefore, in suggestion to the ongoing negotiation, I don't even know where the negotiation will go, because even if it's negotiated, it is the National Assembly that will now make a law to review this one. This one has expired on the 23rd of April. And therefore, I'm suggesting that either this Senate can come under private bill, or the executive should, as required by law, bring an act, a bill, executive bill, to review the salaries and wages as appropriate. That's my contribution.
The two Senator Hajj Sakari.
In stepping down the bill, I would like Mr. President and the entire Senate to please pay more attention to these people, because I know how much people have lost in the last 24 hours. I think 60,000 might be sounding very good. Let the Senate, in the wisdom, the whole of Senate members, let us see what we can do in persuading both Labour and the federal government in looking at between 75 and 90,000 naira. Because if you go by 90,000 naira, it means in the last 5 years, which
this law was made. It means if you divide 90,000 times, divide 200%, let's say it's 200%, 90,000, divided by 5 is 40. And the food inflation, the purchasing parity, and other things we have in the market is also about 32% to 33%. So labor should be very happy in what we are saying. So we must not only look or wait to make law. We must send out a delegation both to labor like we have did before and also to the federal government and saying let us up to 90,000 naira. And every party should stop at that, because if they postpone for 1 week and nothing is doing, look at pulling down national grid. Mr. President, is not an easy job. That national grid might take another 3-4 days to come up, because shutting down a national grid, starting it up is a problem. So everybody must stand up today, if it means closing this plenary, for you and few other people to go to the executive and go to labor and stop this, because this is not good for our country. People are trying to pull down democracy, and we must not allow that to happen, because we know the importance of democracy. So labor must be cautioned, and the federal government also must be cautioned to be encouraged to be able to come to a common ground with labor. We cannot just wait and wait. So my submission is that 90,000 naira is about 40% increment in the labor something. It's not bad. It's going to be difficult for some private sectors to pay, but we just have to bear the bill. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity.
So even mentioning an amount is as if we are debating. There is a tripartite committee set up by the federal government with the TUC, NLC, and they are discussing. And what they have just done now is to resume the negotiations. A lot of variables will be taken into consideration before they arrive at any particular figure. Just by way of information, the Senate leadership, in combination with the House leadership, myself in attendance, the Right Honorable Speaker Tajuddin in attendance, we met with both sectors. We met with organized labor, the TUC, the NLC. We met with the Secretary to Government of the Federation, Minister of Finance, and all those, including the head of service. And we met for over 5 hours to see whether we could come into this resolution that they have arrived at now, suspend the strike, resume negotiations. So let us not debate much. Let us give them the opportunity to resume negotiations. We shouldn't even debate, because if we want to debate, we begin to question a lot of things. For instance, shutting down national grid could amount to economic sabotage. Stopping children from taking WAEC means that you have set those children back by 1 year. Stopping the Hajj is not only religious sacrilege, it's also unheard of. I understand a plane was coming from Mecca and had to, it went back empty. The plane went back empty. So, and then children that were taking ICT.
The plane, sir, came to lift pilgrims from Nigeria, but because of strike, you couldn't lift anybody.
Land.
So it went back to Saudi Arabia empty. So those pilgrims couldn't go.
No, we are not going to debate. But no, we are not. Please, let's not debate. But I understand that even children that were taking WAEC ICT examination were pushed out of their examination halls. And WAEC is a West African event. It is not a Nigerian event. That means that those children will have to wait for another 1 year before they can go and take another WAEC exam. So there are so many things involved in what is going on. So my personal opinion would be that we thank them for agreeing to go back to the negotiation table. We urge the federal government to expedite action on negotiations in order to arrive at something that is acceptable, at least acceptable to both parties, or something that is reasonably acceptable to both parties. And then immediately thereafter, since the last minimum wage has expired, as an act of parliament, they should immediately send us an executive bill for us to commence work. It is when we are doing our work with the next executive bill that we will now sit in closed session to discuss the modalities of how to stop the situation we found ourselves, so it will not repeat itself. Because when we have a terminal date, bam, and that terminal date, we did not even tell them that negotiations should start a year before, so that when it is expiring, then we know that before 1 year, they would have arrived at something. It just expired like that, and the next thing is there's a vacuum. And so Labour took advantage of it. So it's incumbent upon us, when the executive bill comes, for us to know what to do, so that this situation will not repeat itself. I don't know whether the former Senate President has anything to add.
Of the Senate and the leadership of the National Assembly for your intervention with the Labour and other stakeholders. Secondly, Mr. President, I think the issue is whether we debate this or not shouldn't be our main focus. I believe that the negotiations will hold between now and the next 1 week, and you still have some role to play as our leaders in this. My thinking is we cannot fix any figure here. We cannot contemplate any figure. But I also believe that, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, it's not all about figure. Some economic policies could really help. Some economic policies. What are these policies, Mr. President? I don't know them. But I believe that enhancing the value of our currency, the naira, is such an important issue, because that will have whatever it is that we are able to provide as minimum wage to help Nigerians. And while the Labour, NLC and TUC are the ones clamoring for the minimum wage, I want to remind us that we have the rest of Nigerians who will be going to the same market, who may not enjoy any minimum wage. So as we deal with the minimum wage, Mr. President, we should also be thinking of those who have no employment at all, because they constitute the bulk of those we represent. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you. On the negotiation, otherwise it will mean that we are jumping the gun, and we are trying to settle the issues for them. There are many variables that they will look at. Capacity to pay, and the ability of states, local governments, and private sector to even pay. They will also be looking at the fact that if the minimum wage is too high, then the possibility of retrenchment of workers will occur. And I think they will take comparative analysis to know that the last minimum wage, which was fixed by this parliament as an act of 30,000 naira, how many states were able to pay? How many local governments were able to pay? How many employers of labor were able to pay? We'll be looking at those things, because it's important that a holistic approach be looked at. And I have taken the suggestion that we should not rest until we arrive at an amicable resolution of the issue, that the National Assembly leadership should also continue to make its own contributions towards the ongoing negotiation. On that note, I want to thank the Nigerian Labour Congress and the TUC for listening to the voice of Nigerians and the international community, calling out the strike to enable negotiations to continue. And we wish them well in the negotiations. On our part, we will continue to do our best by making contributions and at the same time awaiting the incoming bill for us to enact for the benefit of all Nigerians. Yes, Senator Sani.